My name is Jack Sezer. I'm pretty much just I podcast. I write on Substack. I am currently finishing my master's in philosophy at the University of Dallas. This fall, I'll be getting my PhD in philosophy at the University of Texas in Dallas. I have my undergraduate degree in theological studies or Christian studies from Dallas Baptist University. And then I have my first master's degree in biblical and theological studies from Dallas Theological Seminary. I generally just a pretty boring, run-of-the-mill liberal. People call me a neoliberal, but I prefer to just call myself a normal American, a decent American. Philosophically, I focus on ethics. That's kind of where all my attention goes to. So a lot of people, when they hear that I study philosophy, they ask, oh my gosh, you must be reading a lot of Nietzsche. I've read maybe 2 pages of Nietzsche, never read Hegel. I've read Plato's Republic once, and then I've read Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics once, and nothing else of their works. So a lot of people have a lot of misunderstandings about philosophy in the academic sphere. It is not as glamorous as what you might get from grifting podcast. And so that's pretty much me. Focus on politics, focus on ethics. That's me.
Hello, I'm John Guturilov from Melbourne, Australia. I own and operate Your Listener Counselling, host the Your Listener podcast, and write regularly and speak regularly on radio about psychology. I have a history of working with a broad range of clients and presentations with particular interests in trauma, relational concerns and habits. I also have experienced mental illnesses myself, and I combine theoretical knowledge and evidence-based methods with the wisdom gained from my own and clients' experiences to form an approach which is adaptable, person-centered and authentic. On my podcasts, I discuss psychology, critical thinking and social affairs in a unique manner. I eschew politics, rhetoric and lecturing on what to believe, and instead encourage my audience to be more critical and curious consumers of information. I also advocate helping them to develop more detailed, complex knowledge rather than overly simplifying concepts to the extent that they become empty slogans. I particularly welcome collaboration with people who have perspectives which radically differ from mine. Welcome to this collaboration between the Veridical Podcast and the Your Listener Podcast. Thank you for joining us today. As per usual to everyone out there, if you have concerns about yourself or somebody else, please seek advice from a professional. Never take advice from the internet or from the media. If you are seeking counselling from me, you can find my contact details in the description of this episode, and you can also find Jack's contact details if you'd like to contact him for collaboration with him. In today's episode, we're going to be discussing whether division in politics and social philosophy is positive or whether it could be negative. Let's begin the discussion. I understand that something about which you're particularly passionate is politics and standing for normative ethics and standing for what is right. And I understand that something that you believe might be a bit controversial, but a belief that you hold dearly is that it's good that there's division in politics. And I was wondering, what do you mean by this? What are the mechanics of division and why is this a good thing?
Yeah, so you'll hear oftentimes, man, politics is just so divisive these days. The state of politics in my country, whoever is saying this, they'll say, oh my gosh, it's so divisive. Why are we letting politics divide us? We could be working together. We could be getting along. This works if the sort of the big, wider bullseye that everyone's working on is a shared bullseye. However, when people come to have different end goals, different end aims, then coexistence, ideologically coexistence, is untenable and should not be sought out. So what I mean by that is it's not that you should exile these people from your land geographically. I'm not crazy in that regard. However, there's this attempt of like, hey, you're allowed to say whatever, these people, certain people can say whatever they want, no matter how depraved. People can support any politician, no matter how depraved he is, or no matter how antithetical he is to democracy or liberalism at large or human flourishing. He can be the most morally repugnant person ever and do it publicly and be proud about it. And there can be movements of saying, empathy is a human weakness. We should maybe one particular party, call them, the the Gemocrats. If someone said, hey, the Gemocrats are, domestic terrorists at large, which was said in a country that we all know, there's this idea that people that support that behavior should then be able to, get lunch with their friend who disagrees, and they should be able to just have a conversation about sports, or they should be able to have a conversation about the weather, or about how their work is going. There's this idea that you should be able to go to a social function knowing that so many people support the most misanthropic, most morally depraved actions done in the public sphere in centuries, and you should be able to just eat your pizza, drink your beer, and everyone should get along. There's not an elephant in the room. There's like a nuclear bomb in the room, and everyone believes that to confront this in a social setting, to raise awareness about this, you're doing nothing but, for me specifically, for years I've been accused as the guy that will, ruin the dinner party. He'll ruin the Bible study. He'll ruin the coffee hangout. He'll ruin the backyard gathering because he just has to bring up politics. He just has to do it. He has nothing better to do. It's his identity, which it's not. And this is something I will gladly double down on. I will gladly bring up people that support misanthropic aims, or things that are subverting of democracy, or things that are affecting liberalism at large, things that are undermining our norms, which we are realizing shouldn't be norms but should be laws. That's why I say it's good. When I say it's good, I'm not saying I enjoy division. I don't think anyone enjoys division. I would like to just go hang out at the backyard gathering, drink my beer or my gin and tonic, eat my pizza, and talk about philosophy, or talk about, I'm not really into sports, but just pretend I was. I would like to talk about sports. I would like to talk about philosophy. I'd like to talk about cool books. I would like to talk about the NASA Artemis shuttle going to the moon right now. I'd love to talk about those things. To prioritize those over the nuclear bomb in the room, I think I'm doing I think I'm doing something wrong there. I think there's something ignorant about doing that. And so it strikes me the wrong way, and I'll allow you to respond to that. That's why I think that when I say division's good, I'm not saying it's enjoyable. I'm saying it makes sense. It's like if I killed your family right now and you were sad, I wouldn't say it's necessarily good that you're sad. I would say it's good you're reacting that way, because you'd be crazy not to be sad that I just killed your whole family. So that's what I mean when I say division's good. I'm saying it's feeling the need to be divided or separated or quarantined from these folks, feeling the need to make sure people know you don't even loosely affiliate with people that are permitting this behavior. I think that's a normal reaction. Instead of good, I should say normal and acceptable, and a sign that you're sane. I'll say that.
I can understand exactly what you mean, and there's some interesting psychology to explore there. First of all, when there is a clearly problematic belief, which does exist, and I have said for a long time and will continue to argue that certain beliefs have inherent problems with them. And if we don't accept that and accept that there is a certain level of objective truth, then we can never function harmoniously as a society, because it would be an idea that allows for certain bad actors with destructive beliefs to then enact those destructive beliefs and hurt innocent people. So we have to have a shared sense of objective morality, and we have to work towards that and be willing to help each other work towards it. Otherwise, we will very quickly hurt each other. So if somebody is espousing beliefs that go against goodness, natural goodness, and go against our humanity, it's perfectly understandable that it would be difficult to see that person without some degree of contempt, because in your mind, if that person's wishes were to be enacted, or what they think are their wishes, I'll get into that in just a minute, but what they think their wishes are, if they were able to enact those wishes, then innocent people could be hurt. And that would allow potentially even you as an individual doing the talking to them to potentially be hurt as well, if their beliefs work against your best interests. And I understand that's also why people do argue that it's impossible usually to separate a person from their political beliefs, because if a person believes in an idea, then it's easy to assume that that has something to do with their inherent beliefs and their inherent goals in life. And so if because you may argue, if a person doesn't have these particular goals, then why would they be attracted to those particular political beliefs? What I do want to examine further in this case is whether divided groups that are divided from each other, actually do have separate goals. Because you mentioned we can't all unite unless we have a larger bullseye, that is to say, a united goal. But I'm wondering what you mean when you say different groups have different goals. Like I believe I know what you mean on a surface level basis, but I'd like to hear in your words what you mean by that.
If you look at the American political landscape, and I look left of center, there's particular people that are more aligned with communism, and there are particular people that are more, or there's a particular group more aligned with communism, and a particular group more aligned with liberalism at large. So they're capitalists, they support free trade, they like American hegemony, they like Western ideas, the broad Western right to self-determination, et cetera, it's that boring stuff. A lot of people accuse the left of center in America of infighting. I say infighting. What is the idea that these groups are under the same umbrella? We've put up this arbitrary divide and said, okay, this is the left of the line, and this is the right of the spectrum, and this is the left of the spectrum. But people always complain in America that we have a two-party system. No, we don't. We have a certain section left of center, which is not really associated with the ideas of liberalism. So when we say these two groups are infighting, what are they in? By in, do we just mean they're not to the right? That's not. I don't think that's a good characterization. I don't think it really gets us anywhere. And I don't think it's infighting for liberals and progressives to fight. I don't think that's infighting now, because I don't think they're in the same group. I don't think they're in a bubble together. I don't think they share common goals. You listen to one of those groups, every time they talk about America, it's American imperialism, American military industrial complex, and the plight of capitalism. You listen to the other group and it's, we want, liberty, we want democracy, we, want other people to realize the fruits of what we've enjoyed here, and we want other people to share in these fruits. These are not these. They get lumped together so much, and that's why when I say you can't coexist, well, you can coexist geographically. That's not what I mean by coexist. I mean ideologically coexist. I shouldn't be communicating with some of these other folks as if they have the same. Communicate with some of these other folks as if they want to work towards the same end goal with me. Right of center, you might have people that think Jews are the cause of all the problems in the world, and they run the universe, they run Hollywood, they eat babies, they're ruining the world. And you have the other side of this political spectrum, which don't think this. When these people are fighting, I wouldn't necessarily call it infighting. So that's what I mean when I say there's different goals. We have some groups in the world at large, I guess you could say, but we'll know what I'm talking about, who are in favor of theocracy. They would want a Christian nation with Christian laws dictated by a blending of the Old and New Testament. And we have people want theocracy, and they advocate for theocracy. Well, theocracy is completely antithetical to liberalism.
Jack, you've made a number of excellent points there, and I'd like to speak to each of them in turn and discuss some of the philosophy and the psychology behind the matters that you've described here. My audience will be, and perhaps your audience will be, familiar with some of these concepts, but it bears repeating because for me, this is one of the most important subjects that I discuss in social psychology and in philosophy. There's a concept known as reification. I talk about it often in my work, and reification is the psychological act of treating something theoretical as if it is physical or as if it can be observed objectively. Now, the reason it's so pivotal to our functioning is because our brains can only function with a sense of structure and a sense of having having a concrete sense of that with which you are working, even if what we are working with isn't innately concrete. So whenever we have ideas which are essential to how we perceive the world and how we work with the world, our brains, in an implicit level, treat them as if they are concrete, and they treat them as if they have an objective sense of existence that does not change regardless of the person who is perceiving them or understanding them. In other words, we implicitly assume that these ideas have an objective truth that is completely independent of how people perceive it. Now, objectivity is a real phenomenon. I will submit that. Reification is both a necessity, because if we don't reify and if we don't try to work with ideas in a concrete sense, we basically couldn't live, because our minds are constantly making interpretations of the world that if we don't treat certain interpretations as being objectively truthful, our minds would effectively have no means of actually deciding how to operate, because we need to have certain assumptions taken for granted or taken in place in order for us to then decide how to live our lives. Now, this is both a necessity, but it's also a major problem in our thinking. And the reason it's a major problem is that it leads us to assume that just because a concept exists, that it is a natural objective concept that must be inherently as we perceive it and should guide how we operate. But there is a difference between a natural concept and a socially constructed concept. A natural concept exists independently of the human mind. It exists by our nature. It is a phenomenon that, whether we like it or not, or whether we think this or that of it, will always be true. It is always inherent. It exists inherently in truth. Then there are socially constructed concepts. Socially constructed concepts are created in our minds, so they are not necessarily true objectively, but over the course of human civilization, we have created those concepts as a means to guide how we work, as a means to guide how we treat each other, as a means to guide what we think, and as a means to effectively guide how civilizations run. Now, I've said this before in one of my own episodes, but there are a number of there are probably more reified concepts in the world than there are, or socially constructed concepts, I should say, than there are naturally constructed ones. And when we talk about different groups having different goals and infighting, this is particularly relevant because concepts such as the left of politics, the right of politics, culture, religion, economics, they all derive from a basic set of human needs and our attempts to actually meet those needs. But at the same time, the concepts themselves have been created in an attempt to meet those needs, but we have still created them. They're not inherent. So nature didn't create us, or God didn't create us and then say, right, this person is going to be a left wing, this person is going to be a socialist, this person is going to be a Marxist, this person is going to be a Kantist, this person's going to be a conservative, this person's going to be a politician, this person's going to have this much money, this person's going to be poor. All these concepts derive out of our own thinking and our own attempts to understand the world and our attempts to operate as a society. And this is the problem with people saying there is infighting amongst the left, there is infighting amongst the right, or the left stand for this, or the right stand for this. Because when you refer to the left or the right, a number of things are happening within your mind. If you are someone who is against that side of politics, by conceptualizing certain people as being on the opposite side, your mind is actually narrowing the focus of what you notice about those people so that you only notice the factors that are in opposition to what you believe. And if you only notice those, you then learn to integrate everything else that you observe about those people into those so that you still see them as the polar opposite of you. If you have accepted your side as the right side, what you also then do is by a process known as cognitive dissonance, you may accept some ideas from your side of politics and then rationalize that all the other ideas are correct, even though you may not have agreed with them outside of that context, because your mind is trying to look for a consistent philosophy, something that it can take for granted and say, right, this is the truth, this is what I believe, I'll just take it for granted and I'll just live my life on this basis. So even if you ask someone prior to accepting a political standpoint, if they accept certain ideas and they say they wouldn't, by virtue of then accepting other political ideas from that side of politics, they are in real danger of then accepting ideas that they wouldn't have otherwise agreed with, simply so that their mind has a sense of consistency. Now, that's why it's a fallacy to say that there is infighting, because if you ask each of the people who represent different conservative groups and different right-wing groups and different left-wing groups, and you ask each of the people who represent those different groups, do you stand with other groups on your side? They will probably say, no, they don't represent us. We're the real leftists or the real rightists. But then every other group will say the same thing. So the problem is they genuinely believe within themselves that they have different goals. And they genuinely believe that the goals that they should pursue are the correct ones for society, because often they do have opinions on what the laws should be and how society should run. But here's the problem. Our core needs are all basically the same, no matter where you are in the world, no matter how rich or poor you are, no matter what your culture is, no matter what your religion is, and no matter what your political needs are, or political beliefs rather. Our core needs are all practically identical. What's happened over the course of civilization is we started with those basic needs, and then we invent ideas in an attempt to understand a world that we actually can't understand fully, because it's more complex than anything our mind can understand. We create ideas in an attempt to understand. We create ideas to give ourselves a sense of, I know the correct answer to everything. We also follow these ideas because it then gives us a sense of connection with other people. We can say, well, I agree with this and that person agrees with this, therefore we are friends. We can trust each other. I would say that all the different people on the ground, and when I say people on the ground, I mean anyone who is not a powerful person, someone who is not a politician or a media mogul, or someone who isn't a pundit, someone who's not responsible for actually selling the ideas. They're people with normal jobs like you and I, who are just trying to understand the world and just trying to get by in life. All of those people on the ground actually have the same needs and think they're pursuing the same goals, or they are pursuing the same goals. They think other people with different beliefs are pursuing different goals because what other people are doing is a genuine threat to them. But each of those people are actually pursuing the same goals. They just see them as different. They need to love. We all have the same needs. We need to be loved. And having similar beliefs to other people makes it more likely that they will love us and make us feel loved. We have a need for security. Having certain beliefs gives us a sense of connection with other people in our group, which means that we can then feel secure that they will support us and not abandon us and not hurt us. Part of that sense of security is knowing the truth. Having a certain set of beliefs gives us a sense of knowing what the truth is. We have a need for our basic amenities to be met: food, water, shelter. Well, if you live in a community where political division exists, being of a particular political side means that you can get a job with someone who has those same beliefs, and you don't have to worry about them discriminating against you. We all have the same needs, and we're all trying to meet them. Our real enemy isn't the other person on the ground, because we can actually all, if we're willing to, willingness is key here. If we are willing to accept that we are all ignorant and that we all don't know something, and that we all make mistakes in thinking, and are willing to understand what other people's needs are and why our beliefs may then impact other people's needs and be harmful to them, we can all create a society whereby we all live by the same norms and we are all working in a way that does not cause harm to other people, and that we can all meet our own needs and help each other meet our needs. That's for all of us people on the ground. The people with the different goals are the politicians or the pundits who want us to be divided, because seeking power has an inherent mental corruption inherent in it. It's a need for power, a desire to control people, and that is it is a dangerous desire, because when you seek power and you try to work for it, and you will sell anyone anything they want to believe in order to gain it, you are not working for the best interests of humanity. You are working for the best interests of your desires, and that's not healthy. And that's why division occurs, but it's also why we can, if we choose to, create a unified set of beliefs that all work towards those same goals.
First off, yeah, reification. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, there's a lot of concepts that we have that we believe are like set in stone and definitively demarcated in our world, and they're not, right? Like, I understand that a nation state, a country, a state, a city, yeah, it's lines on paper that are not actually there on the ground. And, a culture, we just say, here's the language, here's the music, here's the dress, here's the food. Sure. Yes, these things are helpful. I don't think you were saying this you didn't speak too much on this, and I don't think it's that important yet. There's some things that, yes, are not empirically existing in our world, but however, money, the money in my American USD is actually, what do we mean by it's worth this much? What does that mean, right? A banana might be worth more if I couldn't exchange this for material wealth. Sure. These are stories. I think you all know Harari walks through a lot of sort of these narratives that we tell ourselves, but they're helpful narratives. They help. They help these groups of people, all with individual needs and desires. They help us all sort of navigate, and so they're helpful stories. They're helpful fictions, and so I think some of these fictions should be preserved. When people realize that borders don't exist, I don't think the next conclusion is that we shouldn't have borders, right? You talked about cognitive dissonance and like this zombie mentality towards your political party. I don't think anyone's ever going to accuse me. Well, many people right of center will accuse me of being a rank and file leftist, but anyone who spends 2 minutes talking with me people generally know me as pretty pro-capitalist. I'm pretty pro-American hegemony. I cringed at the defund the police movement. I generally want people to move away from race talk. No one's going to accuse me of being a leftist. But yes, cognitive dissonance is a problem. It's we all know the drones in our society that just there's nothing good that the left can do. There's nothing good that the right can do. I will say, under one political party right now, it seems to be there is nothing good they can do, and that's quite noticeable. Next, you talked about sort of our core needs. This is something I guess I'll respond a little bit more heavily to. Yes, we all need water and shelter and food and a sense of belonging. Sure. And you said, if we could just all realize this. Well, one, I would disagree. If you're a theocrat, you think your core need is getting to heaven. And a lot of these theocrats are willing to endure a lot of suffering here on earth to ensure a healthy payoff in heaven. There's a lot of theocrats, or even not theocrats, there's a lot of religious folk in the world who will rejoice at the suffering of others and will think it's good to infringe on as you said, the core needs. They will think it's good to infringe on the core needs and the well-being of others if they are infidels, if they are part of the Antichrist movement, if they are not submitting to the church. Maybe these core needs are good to get taken away. These people are not always politicians. You can often find them being some of the most politically detached people ever. They do not share my core needs. But sure, these folks might be rare. Widely, we do all share the core needs. But even Steven Pinker writes a book called Enlightenment Now. And in this book, he kind of documents that the world, not just Western society, but the world as a whole has progressed very far. Hunger keeps going down and down and down and down and down. There's very few people that are hungry today. Doesn't mean there's not people hungry that we should feed, but there's very less people that are hungry these days. War is becoming more and more rare, despite there being 2 major ground wars right now, maybe 3 major ground wars right now. War is on an all-time low. Democracies are increasing. Countries are realizing liberalism is sort of the go-to thing we all want to be doing. So the world is getting better at large, right? Not just Western society, but the world as a whole is getting better. Every time I see a homeless person here in America, this homeless person has like an iPhone 14. Sometimes our iPhone is better than mine. It doesn't mean we shouldn't create social safety nets. Doesn't mean we should fund welfare programs. It doesn't mean that we shouldn't look out for our homeless, but we just need to address that things are getting better. All the core needs are met, pretty much. And assuming if you're listening to this podcast and this is relevant to you, your core needs are already met. Now it's just a question of what makes us flourish more, who is trying to infringe on that flourishing, who's trying to affect the journey, the adventure we go on to meet our core needs. Who's trying to force us to be religious, who's trying to force us to give up private property, who's trying to force us to submit to a particular authority, who's trying to police our sexuality, who's trying to police what we do privately in the bedroom. Who's trying to do this? Now, I'm not saying none of these things should ever be policed. I'm not a libertarian. I very much like the age of consent. Maybe we should increase the age of consent. I'm not saying these things can't be regulated, but is there such thing as overregulation? Are there people trying to burn books? Are there people trying to, monitor abortions? I'm not saying no one ever turns to me as the crazy pro-abortion guy, but maybe on another day. But the core needs are already met. That's my point. The core needs are met. Now it's just a matter of how do we want to how do we want to model the society that we do day-to-day life? The world is more complex. You're right when you kind of brought that up. But I do think there are times where we can overcomplicate things. Maybe in some countries right now, it is as easy to say as these people are very misanthropic. And I don't think addressing that we all have core needs of food, water, shelter, and a sense of belonging is going to resolve these problems. I'm not coming at you here, but you said something that triggered me. I get triggered. That's my favorite word right now. I get triggered when people say, we just need to realize that it's the politicians and the elites and the big boys on top, and they want to divide us. I disagree. Certainly, there's a lot of people up top that benefit from division or benefit from culture wars. Certainly, this happens. Sure. However, I think there's been a demonization of politicians and our institutions. People think the academic elites are they want us distracted, or the media elites, since they're all owned by Time Warner or whatever, they all want us divided. I don't believe this. I'm not saying you said that you didn't say this, but a lot of people think it's just the Jews. It's the Jews, and they want us divided so they can benefit themselves. I don't believe any of them. Certainly there's elites that are abusing their power. That doesn't not exist. But for the most part, if you're entering politics, I think a lot of politicians share the same aims of we want to facilitate a society with a shared philosophy of what is widely right and wrong. Maybe it doesn't get to the precise answers of some of our deepest moral questions, but for the most part, it's good that we're not murdering, we're not stealing, we're not raping, we're not killing, we're not invading other sovereign nation states. Our border is protected and our economy runs well. I think a lot of politicians actually kind of share this approach, which is good. We should want that. And so I don't think it's because when I hear people, maybe you can respond to this. When I hear people complain about the elites or the politicians, I ask them, suggest to me an alternative to society where 9 billion people, or here in America, 350 million Americans, can exist with appropriate infrastructure, appropriate economic regulation, security from outside threats, security from internal threats, and facilitating a society where voices have, the right to be heard, not on private platforms, but in the public sphere, and people have generally good possibilities for self-enrichment. If you can suggest me a political or social model that doesn't have quote unquote elites at the top, where what the good, the true, and the beautiful things that are worth achieving can be maximized, I'm all for it.
As a counsellor, I receive referrals from others, and I also like to help my audience become aware of resources and other providers which may be beneficial, as well as help other individuals and organisations gain exposure. That's why I host the Your Listener Partner Network, and I'd like to thank my partners for their support. I'd like to introduce Claire of Finding Solutions Counselling. Claire is a retired registered nurse and midwife holding a diploma in counselling and registered with the Australian Counselling Association. Married with 4 children and 3 grandchildren, she is constantly amazed at the ways that her clients manage to cope in difficult, daunting circumstances. Drawn to helping people all her life, she thoroughly enjoys using solution-focused brief therapy. This evidence-based modality aids in identifying clients' best hopes. Working in a co-constructive manner, she and her clients describe individual strengths, abilities, skills and traits, explore past positive experiences, or describe the client's hopes for the future to achieve their desired outcome. She presently specialises in helping women with grief and loss issues. Find Claire at www.findingsolutionscounselling.com.au. Before I respond, I want to ask you a question. What led you to the conclusion that people don't seek elitism for their own power gain in these circumstances that we describe?
Well, really, I just don't know what the evidence of that would look like. It's hard for me to not sound so one-sided. But, maybe in other countries, maybe just pick your favorite European state. I don't know anything about Swiss politics, so I'll just use that as a good example. The different parties that are running against each other, they might largely share the same views in that we want Swiss people to succeed. We want them to be able to afford things. So I hear things aren't that affordable over there. We want them to afford things. We want them to be healthy. We want, if they want to be carpenters, or if they want to be work in tech, or if they want to make art, we want them to be able to pursue those possibilities. And so or I guess they would probably have a multi-party system. The multiple parties running there have the same end goal, but they don't have the same path to get to that end goal. And so it's up to the people, I guess, to test and pressure test different pathways and see which pathway gets them to that end goal quicker and least painfully. Because they all have the same end goal roughly, and I say end goal, like same end goal, they all when I say roughly, I really mean like very loosely defined notions of human flourishing, which I think when you get into the millions and millions of people, you kind of just want to aim for these loosely defined concepts. So I might wish things were a little bit more precise. But when they're all working towards the same goal, division and unrest in your society is costly. It's costly to have a culture war. Financially, it's costly. It's costly on like the will of the people. I mean, we are coming up with, we've had so much culture war here in America. I think this next election, you look at, people are fed up. I mean, they are so worried about, boys with vaginas and girls with penises. And they're so worried about, brown people and gay people. This is so central to their identity and so concerning to them. If someone is hoping to benefit off of this in any way, I wonder what that could look like. I'm sure there's a tanky out there who has a really wonderful theory on this, or an anti-Semite out there who has a really wonderful theory on this. But I guess it never makes sense. One of the best things that was ever told to me was that life is almost always boring. And I think that's good. I think it's good that life is boring, because when life is boring, I can do what I want. I can read the books I want. I can pursue the ideas I think are good. And I can play my video games, and I can go outside, and I can go exercise, et cetera, et cetera. I can marry who I want. I can marry my wife, all this stuff. And so I think it's good when life is boring, but people want life to be more exciting. And it's more exciting to think that there's a group of elites who, want me to be mad. There's a group of elites out there who want me to keep, just brain rotting all day. And they work together. They know what they're doing is wrong. They know they would never want their kids to be in my position, but they're happy that I'm in it, and it benefits them. This seems to me quite unlikely. But when we tell ourselves a story, the misfortunes that come upon us are a lot more exciting. We also don't have to take as much responsibility for our actions. Karl Popper was an excellent philosopher in the 20th century. He wrote a book called The Open Society and Its Enemies. In there, he's largely critical of Plato, Hegel, and Marx, but he's talking about the open society. We want an open society. We want not to believe that our fate is sealed, that we can determine, a good end goal for our society. And Karl Popper gives a really good analysis of how we should police and regulate our public institutions. So our media, our health, our history, our academia, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I think he does a great job, but in there he's kind of saying, yeah, we all largely realize kind of what we want. There's bad actors, but they're quite rare. And as long as you have a good system like liberalism, these bad actors won't always get as much oxygen as they want. And I think that's even, despite the current predicament of America, I think we are still, for the most part, holding on to that. And I think Western society at large is still holding on to that.
Before I give my answer, I just have one more question. From your perspective, can you define a narcissist?
I'm probably certain that there's a psychologist or a counselor or someone dealing in sociology that'll be upset with my definition. If I'm correct, it's probably someone who doesn't think they can do wrong, or they always think there's someone that they always. I was under the assumption it's always someone that is happy to scapegoat someone else.
So you're close. That's one of the qualities that constitutes narcissism. So a narcissist is someone who, born of a very deep sense of insecurity, is constantly seeking self-validation through means that ultimately upset their relations with other people, because they're constantly willing to forego other people's interests and sometimes even take advantage of other people, even in situations where it would otherwise be destructive to them. If it fuels their sense of self-worth, they will approach that solution. I'm going to get to why that's important in a minute. First of all, I wouldn't say that our core needs are actually met. Our core needs are never met. See, in psychology, our core needs are not just for biological survival. One of the most important needs that our mind has is a constant, and it's constantly operating. There's no point at which it is met. It is constantly being revised. We are constantly seeking at an unconscious level to keep feeding this need. It's a need to have a sense of certainty about what's truthful, about what's not truthful, about our own worth, and about what we can safely do to avoid discomfort and to avoid pain, both psychological pain and physical pain, or social pain, or other forms of unease in the course of our life. Our core needs are actually not met, from the sense that even though we have, I'm living in Australia, for example, we are, compared to some countries, relatively prosperous. Not perfect, but we're relatively prosperous. A lot of people can meet their core biological needs that we had right from the very birth of our civilization, back when humans first evolved into humans. Most of us can meet a lot of those basic needs. But just because those needs are met, it doesn't mean that unconsciously we are not constantly trying to seek psychological needs. So those core psychological needs are never met. Now, with regards to the people who do bad, misanthropes in certain language, with regards to them and their activities being extensions of or additions to basic needs, and to argue that what they're doing is not related to their core needs because their core needs are already met, well, again, their core psychological needs are still to feel secure. Now, a theocrat wants to feel secure that at the end of their life, all the hard work that they put in will be worth it, and that something good will come at the end of that. They want reassurance. If I do this, and this, even though whether I agree with it or not, if I just do this, and this, I will get to heaven, and heaven will be a good experience for me. And in addition to that, if I admonish, denigrate, and even fight against the needs of other people who don't agree with me, then I have an even better chance of getting into heaven. It sounds like a different goal. It's actually not. It's a need for certainty and a need for reassurance. False security, I will call that, because it is inherently illogical to assume that causing that much turmoil will have a good outcome. But that's only a small selection of people who are religious, by the way. It's not all. But it is still the same core psychological need to want a sense of reassurance. Now, with regards to the idea that it is illogical or perhaps implausible to suggest that there are elites, and what can we do, how could we operate a society without that structure? Okay. Many people do refer to what they believe is rationality and say, if politicians truly were creating division, it would be so destructive for them as well that it wouldn't make sense. In the same way that many people say, well, why would this individual forego money if there's money available? Why would politicians potentially risk losing all this money when it would cause them so many problems? Why would politicians risk having people fighting amongst each other when it makes the economy less productive? And if the economy is less productive, politicians get less. Why would politicians do this if it would impact society so much? Narcissism. A narcissist, you can show a narcissist all the logical evidence that causing all this destruction is illogical and would harm them and would harm society. They wouldn't see it the same way because they're not logical individuals. They would see it and go, you know what? I love the fact that these people are fighting on my behalf. It makes me feel so empowered. They don't think it consciously, but at an unconscious level, they are so enamored with that idea that they would be glad to let it happen, even if it means destruction of other people. You're right that we often do invent narratives, and you're right that often, because we want life to be more exciting, we often invent exciting narratives to make our minds active, to try and seek to try and seek excitement in what we think is a boring world. Well, I have a number of counters to that. Number one, again, it goes back to those core needs, the need to feel certain of what the truth is. Conspiracy theories arise out of that need. I was actually talking to somebody on radio yesterday about this. We have a core need to feel certain of the truth. Conspiracy theories, regardless of whether you agree with them or not, do arise from that need, the need to think, the need to feel, I know the truth about this. And even more so if you feel like you've been a victim in society, feeling like you know a truth that other people don't know can feel quite empowering and quite reassuring. It's to say, well, I'm not going to allow myself to get scammed like all these other people did. I know what the truth is. Not to say I can't be compassionate towards those people, but that's the psychology of it objectively. All these beliefs do arise from that basic need. But at the same time, I would say that even though we do live in excess and we are constantly seeking excitement when we should be trying to tend to our basic needs instead and seeking excitement on top of that, all too often I think we take life for granted too much. And sometimes living a very intellectually stimulating life can be so draining for people that sometimes people seek the boring life and they say, you know what, thinking critically about politics or philosophy or religion, it's just too hard. I'm just going to take the simpler, we don't think it consciously, but unconsciously we go, I'm just going to take the simplest stance that comes my way. I'm going to go and smoke another, I don't mean to be derogatory, but I'm going to go smoke another joint of marijuana, open another stubby of beer, just watch the news. I don't want to know. That's hedonism. That's avoidance. That's saying, because life is hard and engaging intellectually is hard, I'm going to avoid it. Healthy psychological coping, as has been demonstrated by numerous studies, is psychologically successful people, and I'm not talking about money, I'm not talking about status, I'm talking about people who have the healthiest minds. They look at a challenge and they go, I don't care if this is hard, I'm going to face it. I don't care how many people hate me for not agreeing with their political rhetoric or that political rhetoric. I'm going to face this and I'm going to think about it my own way. That's what makes a healthy mind. And what can too often happen is we assume, oh, as a result of not wanting to face the discomfort of there not being easy answers, we go, well, it's quite convenient to just think, again, I'm not having a go at you, but it's quite convenient to just think politicians wouldn't be that cruel, that they wouldn't do all that. It's irrational without realizing people do illogical things that are destructive for themselves because they think it brings them pleasure. I've lost count of people, of the people that I've provided therapy to over the years who have been in abusive relationships with narcissists. Being a narcissistic abuser is not logical in the sense that you're exerting force that's objectively going to cause you harm, but is going to cause someone else harm. That doesn't make any sense. A narcissist doesn't see sense the same way, though. That's one of the reasons why it's perfectly plausible to suggest that division is a manufactured phenomenon. Another reason it's plausible is that if you look at any political argument, any argument that is like stereotypical of any side of politics, anywhere on the political spectrum, all of them have the same psychological flaws involved and the same psychological tendencies. They all come from the same place. They all have the same psychological cognitive flaws involved. If politicians in the West, and I mean, not every Western country is the same, but we all have remarkably similar characteristics politically. If all of these arguments have similar irrationalities, you'd think that someone by now would say, hey, this doesn't make any sense. Maybe there's something we could be doing differently. Plenty of people do, like yourself, but one of our inherent needs is a feeling of safety. Feeling of safety can mean being shielded from the complexities of life and having to exert psychological effort. So more often than not, people say, life's safe, politicians aren't out to get me, which benefits the people who are. Now, in terms of could there be a better system? Again, it's born of our own psychological needs. We have a need for structure. When we evolved, we realized, you know what, we can't do all this on our own. We need structure. People had the right intentions in creating structure. They realized we can live a lot more efficiently and effectively if we help out each other and actually have a structure that gives us a sense of what each of us needs to do. Otherwise, we're all running around trying to do everything for ourselves. It doesn't make any sense. It was logical to start with. But then what happens is you had a few people who realized, hey, these people think they can't live without me. I know what I'll do. And over centuries, corrupt politics evolved. So, in conclusion, is there a better theory? Well, I'd say one of our psychological flaws is we're constantly looking to theory. What we need is to start chasing objective reality and understanding what is objectively good for all of us, what is normative ethics. But all too often, it's a case of we need a theory to guide us, but theory is manufactured by us. Truth manufactures itself. And it's not just in politics. We see this in psychotherapy as well and in psychology. I've argued a lot of the time that there are certain psychotherapeutic methods that are based on theory but are too heavily reified and don't speak to the objective reality of what a person's needs are and how their problems evolve. So it's not just in politics. I say this in all facets of life. But if we were to all decide together, yes, we want a better system, we'd have to say, right, we have to stop just accepting whatever the best thing we can come up with is, whatever the best idea we can come up with. We have to start asking, okay, what's good outside of us? What's not just the best idea that I can think of that seems the most pleasant or the most plausible, but do the grunt work of really thinking through what are the strengths and weaknesses of each of these ideas. Will it happen? No, we're too flawed as a society, like as a race, as a species, we are too flawed to do that. But it's possible. And just like you said, you'll always be willing to interrupt the status quo if it means saying something important. And I'll say the same. I'll say, yes, I'm willing to accept people are flawed. I'm not going to judge people for being flawed. I'm not going to demonize people for being flawed. And I'm not going to reject people for being flawed. And I'm not going to make people feel bad for being flawed. And if I need to help someone within their reality, I'll help them within the bounds of their reality, wherever they want that to go. And as a therapist, I'm constantly dealing with that. I'm constantly helping people decide, what's your reality? What do you want? And what are you willing to take responsibility for? But are we all flawed? Yes, we are all flawed. And if we choose to look at those flaws and say, right, I'm going to own those flaws and I'm going to try to think of something that overcomes those flaws, yes, theoretically, it is possible for us to have a better society that way.
Talking about our core needs never being met, I agree. Truth, or a sense of truth, I guess you could call that a core need. I see a lot of people willingly embrace a notion of postmodernism. So when you talk about like a core need being, the acquisition of truth, I don't really know. I mean, it depends on I hate being cliche and philosophical, but what do you mean by truth, right? If you mean truth as you define it and you alone define it, and you're okay with people disagreeing with you on what truth is, then you don't really need to seek it. You have it. You can form it yourself. That is up to you to decide, and you can construct it, and you can put whatever stories you want in your world, and that is, quote, your truth. Now, obviously, I don't believe this. I don't think you do either. Like we've been talking about normative ethics, objective reality, blah, blah, blah. Though I'm, kind of sympathetic to Kant in that we're all getting just presentations from objects as they are in themselves. Maybe we're not seeing the world as it really is. We're at least seeing the world close enough, or at least in a way where other human beings want to work together to work with the presentations that they're given. It's fine by me. So I don't know if we're seeking, maybe we are all seeking truth, but we might not all mean the same thing. The idea that like reality is objective is quite controversial these days. You can ask someone if they believe in it. I'm almost certain, John, if you go ask 2 people, 3 people, it'll take up to 3 people for you to find someone who doesn't think reality is as accessible as you and I might think it is. And when you talk about politicians or elites wanting us to be ingrained in these culture wars, or I guess I shouldn't say that yet. I should probably talk about how, okay, imagine if we all got together and we did all want to seek truth. I would say that's already been done, right? Here in Western society, we are all seeking truth, and we've all gotten together and we've all kind of collaborated and said, hey, we don't think truth is relative. We think, what is H2O is the same for me as is the same for you. And when murder's wrong for me, murder's wrong for you. But we're curious about more. We want to send more rockets into space. We want to understand how pandemics work so we can all suffer a little bit less. We want to find the most optimal economic system so we can all buy art and buy fun and nice, enjoyable, healthy food and nice cars and nice living space. We all want these things, and we understand that we need to cooperate to acquire these things. Well, at least here in the States, we built a system for that. It's called liberalism. You guys have it there in Australia. People in Europe have it. Africa's largely turning more and more liberal. The Middle East is catching up. Asia is slowly, you look at somewhere like South Korea, Japan, Taiwan, these places are all, Singapore, all these places are sort of moving in the direction of liberalism. And we realize that, like, if you, John, want to go and uncover objective reality for yourself, you're going to have a hard time, because I'm assuming, like me, you probably don't have a big grasp on the hard sciences. I might be interested in astronomy. I don't know shit about astronomy. I don't know anything about chemistry. I don't know anything about engineering. I don't know anything about mathematics, and I don't know anything about physics. I rely on a system to, with my trust, navigate those fields for me. I'm not denying that there's not bad actors. There's certainly bad actors, but there's bad actors in all spheres of life. You don't find less bad people the poorer you go in society, right? So just as many, just as good of a rate as you can find misanthropic people in the elite sector, you can find them maybe more, maybe less in the lower bars of society. This is why we rely on the system of liberalism and Karl Popper's open society to protect us, to shield us from these bad actors. I think we say they don't get held accountable because we think they commit more crimes than they actually do. I think a lot of times we see politicians doing really crazy things. A lot of times these things are just norm breaking, not law breaking. And like I said earlier, I think there's a lot of things we're realizing are norms that we wish would be laws, but they're just norms. You and I agree. People want to construct a narrative that's exciting, that's empowering, that feels safe. But you went back to this thing that, like, we all want to work together. I guess I want to work together with people who want to, find out what's real, find out what's exciting, and what increases our flourishing. So I can only do that in a group where there's not one particular group that's always deferring to conspiracy theories, right? I can work together with these institutions to learn about physics and space and astronomy and germ theory and health and food and economics and philosophy and ethics. I can do all this as long as someone's not always lying repeatedly. There are so many people here that are desperate to subvert the institutions that we need to rely on to uncover these truths. And so now we need to come to the table again and ask ourselves, hey, we do have this core need that is probably not met about getting to the bottom of reality or learning more, just because we like to learn more. Like, maybe we could just survive with eating bananas and listening to music. We could survive on that, but that's not good enough. We want more and we want more and we want more, which is fine. But we have institutions to help us get more and to learn more and to see more. Are there people or are there groups who have a different end goal than you, who are undermining these institutions unjustly without any good facts?
Again, a number of interesting points that you made there. First of all, I just want to clarify, I wasn't so much arguing that we all want to work together, because often we don't realize that we need to. So often we don't, but I'm saying we need to. That's one of our fundamental needs. And if we don't meet that need, then that's why a lot of the social turmoil that we experience does so develop. Let's talk to each of these points again. So first of all, are we seeking truth? And does that depend on how you define truth? Okay. People assume truth is subjective. We want to feel like we know the truth. That's the core need. What people perceive as the truth might be different, but we all have an inherent sense or an implicit sense of wanting to know what the truth is. have we all developed an objective sense of it? You mentioned some concrete subjects like we know that murder's bad, we know that water is water, but those are not the only things that concern us, even if we don't consciously know it. We are constantly concerned about things that we don't know, and we are constantly trying to establish what those truths are. Now, in terms of the practicality of seeking truth, that is separate from the core need. So you are absolutely right that it is impossible for one person to buy and access resources on every conceivable subject and become so familiar with them that they could make an informed decision about what to think. But the point is different. The point isn't that somebody should do that because they'll fail in that task, most likely, and it's not humanly possible for anyone to do it. But the point is that we don't think that way generally. Most people act on their implicit impulses, their mental impulses, and one of the most implicit impulses is to try and come up with an answer of what the truth is about a conceivable subject. Sure, there are plenty of people who will say, I don't know anything about this subject or that subject, but in matters that affect us, we implicitly want to know what the truth is. And all too often, you're right that often we assume as truth the stories that seem the most exciting or the most plausible on face value, or that satisfy other psychological needs that we have without considering whether those facts are objective. I want to bring this back to the concept of division and whether it's a good thing or whether it's a bad thing. We have established through the course of this conversation and by questioning each other, right, that these realities are more complex than what many people assume. We've also established that a lot of these ideas that we hold to be true are based on assumptions. Here's where it gets difficult. A lot of this is semantics. A lot of this is reification. A lot of this is based on how we define certain concepts. We have choices about how we consider people. We have choices about what we think and how we treat people, right? I'm going to use this very moment as an example. As you said before, it is understandable and expected that when we see someone who supports an idea that could impact us negatively, we may see them as an enemy. But think about this conversation that we're having right now, you and I. The idea of just trusting systems is completely objectionable to me. I'm not saying we shouldn't have them. I'm not saying that we don't need them. I'm not even saying that we could tear down society, as some people say. It's impossible to do. But I don't see you as an enemy, right? I know you don't see me as an enemy either. Well, I assume you don't. But if I took the mindset of the people on the ground who are espousing conspiracy theories and saying this person's a liberal, they're the danger, or, this person's a fascist, they're the danger. And if I was to assume, well, I know the truth, I trust this system of truth, and anything that violates that, I need to be divided from them because they're the enemy. If I genuinely did that, I wouldn't be having this conversation with you right now. And I think that if you genuinely, I'm not suggesting you're insincere, but it sounds like to me, it feels like you've made some accommodations in allowing me to be expressive of my perspective as well. And if you genuinely believed in division in the same way that you said you would, I don't think you would have made those accommodations. So I think you are more accommodating than what you've described. Something that you have to ask philosophically whenever you accept a precedent, a principle like division is a good thing, you always have to ask, what are the long-term ramifications of implementing it? If we implement that too easily, I'm not suggesting that people shouldn't be held accountable for their actions. Like, some actions are bad, and even if you believe they were okay, you still need to face the consequences for them. But just on the ground where all we're doing is discussing ideas within the confines of the law and within the confines of discussing ideas and not acting on them, if we accept that division is acceptable, what would become of our society? You and I wouldn't have this podcast right now. We would probably, if you and I were in the same country and a civil war broke out because of this division, you and I could end up killing, one of us could end up killing the other. And civil war, like, people shouldn't be delusional. In any country, civil war is a possibility. We're not safe. Like, we could break out into civil war at any moment. We can choose not to let it happen, but we have to take responsibility for it. But if civil war were to break out, you and I, who may pose no threat to each other, if we were to just understand what each other needed and actually choose to do something together, we could completely avoid that. But if we make the assumption of division's a good thing, two innocent lives here could end up being lost as a result of assuming that, yes, we have to be divided. This is factually bad. Again, normative ethics, completely valid philosophy. Societies run better with it. But each side of it seems like each political group has some sector of it that wants division and says, yes, division is a good thing. I would strongly recommend anyone who thinks that, whether you be on the left or the right, far left, far right, wherever you may fall on that spectrum, or at least think you do, strongly reconsider it, just because when you dig below the surface, you see that there is actually more complexity to what you assumed was a simple matter than you initially thought. There are no simple answers, but what we've done here is we've taken a small step forward. What you and I have done tonight have taken a small step forward. It's not going to save the world, but it's a small step forward. And that's just two of us. I would say completely worthwhile. We both got food for thought tonight. And if we had have assumed that division was the only option, then I don't think we would have had this.
I guess we should clarify, and I think I've clarified already, but I'll double down on it. When I say division's good, I'm not saying it's good that we segregate Republicans and Democrats here. We have a Republican water fountain and a Democrat water fountain. I'm not saying we should geographically relocate people, though maybe I'd be in favor if some of them left the country. They certainly seem to hate it here. I'm talking about those on the right now. But when I say division's good, I mean, it's sort of a spicy way of me saying, when you're in social settings, when you're within your community, and your community under more normal times would be able to put politics to the side. We have I don't know about Australian politics, but here there's this idea of hey, when you're at the Thanksgiving dinner table, I guess now it's just any dinner table, you don't bring up religion, you don't bring up politics, because these are divisive. These are divisive things. And it sort of extends out to the less intense commitments of our culture. So generally, for the most part, the trope has been, we're going to put it to the side. We're going to enjoy the dinner. We're going to enjoy the bonfire. We're going to enjoy we're going to steer the conversation away from politics onto something else that we can agree on more. This is usually good. This is usually a good thing, because both parties at the dinner table, in the coffee shop, at the bonfire, whatever, all these people, at least for the most part, usually agree. We don't want each other infringing on the private parts of our lives. We both, at the end of the day, all still probably love free speech. We both, at the end of the day, don't want what's bad for the other person. We don't want this person to suffer needlessly. First off, you can't say the same anymore. You can't say that. That's not the case anymore. These people you will meet people regularly. I meet people. I hang out in generally right of center circles, even though I'm very much to the left. But I think online, I'm very much in the left of center areas. I've slowly been reorienting my life, so I'm around somewhat more like-minded people. Of course, there's people that will always check me. I wouldn't say I'm in echo chambers, but I still do hang out in right. My point is, I can name 4 names. They're not important people. I can name 4 people who I know personally who want our 19th Amendment revoked. 19th Amendment lets women vote. Okay, it's the year 2026. I know 4 people personally who want women to not vote because they think a man should be the head of the household, and that women, because women always vote left, and they're always more emotional and they don't have a good grasp on society, we shouldn't allow them to vote. Okay. For me to know that the person on the other side of the bonfire or the Thanksgiving table thinks this, and for me to ignore that, is for me to do a disservice to my country. Is for me to do a disservice to the overarching moral duties imposed on all humans equally. Okay, these are things you can't let slide. Well, you can't. You can do whatever you want. You shouldn't. You ought not let these people off the hook. Are you doing a disservice to liberalism and democracy? Are you doing a disservice to the moral imperatives laid upon you through reason when you ignore these things? I think you are. I think you're doing a huge disservice. So when I say divided, I mean, being a little hyperbolic, but I really just mean not allowing I shouldn't be saying divided, because I think you should talk to these people. I think you should go see, but I think you should seek them out and talk to them and confront them on these issues specifically. I don't think you should let these things slide. I don't think we should alienate ourselves, because at the end of the day, because I'm not actually divided from these people, I need to do life with them. I need them to show up to work at the grocery store, so I can buy my groceries. I need them to participate in society, stimulate the economy. I need them to serve in the police force and not just want to shoot brown people. Like, I need them to be normal people. And because I said at the beginning of this conversation, I still, though it's waning, I still hold on to a faith that conversation can change minds. Good constructive conversation around what matters and around what's real can still change someone's mind. And so that's what I mean by division is good. What I mean by what I'm really saying, I think I might have said this already. What I mean when I say division is good, I mean it's good we're not treating these people normal, because they're not normal. These are not normal thoughts that maybe in 2026 women shouldn't vote, and Jews, it's good that 132 countries have kicked Jews out of their countries. It's good that we understand that the Earth is 6,000 years old, that we didn't land on the moon, that NASA's on April 1st, we're recording this on April 1st, that the NASA launch is a funny April Fool's joke. It is good to criticize these things. So that's what I mean when I say it's good we're divided against this. What I really mean is it's good we're animated at these ideas, that these ideas make us angry. If the idea is sufficiently crazy, I'm not talking like, do they have a different tax policy than you? Do they have a different view on the healthcare system? Do they have a different view on whether we should be attacking Iran right now? These are things that can be up for disagreement, and we can peacefully coexist and disagree on these things. This is okay. But if they think women shouldn't vote, and that 271,000 Jews died in the Holocaust, and that communism is what's going to be fruitful for our society, or that we should burn books again, or that factory farming's good, et cetera, et cetera. If they have these ideas, this whole thing of like, I think division is good, what I really mean is, if you're not confronting them, not only should you confront them, if you're not confronting them on these things, I think you're ignoring a moral imperative. I think you're doing something immoral to not confront these people and to call them out and to criticize them and to speak to them in public or in private.
You're right that deliberate discussion of important issues is important, that you should seek to discuss important issues, and that you should seek analysis and disagreement. One of the most important aspects of the Your Listener podcast for me is seeking people who have different perspectives, as I'm doing with you right now. The issue that I submit that may evolve from this particular idea that we're discussing here is that the concepts and ideas that we apply to a situation influence how we then interpret it later and then act, and sentiments can escalate. So you've talked about still going to the bonfire and still being willing to sit down with people who are different, but making sure that you deliberately confront the issues. But what you've described is, number one, a framework that assumes that it's certain issues. Number two, you mentioned also we should be angry at these ideas. They should make us emotive. Psychologically and biologically, emotions are one of the things that actually impede our judgment. And that's one of the problems. When we get emotional, and it's hard not to get emotional, but when we get emotional, our brain is actually less able to look at all the facts of a situation. So we may start by saying division means being willing to break norms and say that you don't agree with something. But if you allow emotions to take over that situation, it will very quickly escalate to something else, something beyond what you've defined it as. That's the point I'm trying to make. And again, there may be members of my audience, or maybe even people who know me personally, who may listen to this episode and say, "Oh, John, what are you doing? You've morally failed because you didn't challenge him on this, and you didn't challenge him on that. And you didn't get this, and you didn't get that." Yeah, I know there's lots on which we agree and disagree, but there's a reason why deliberately I don't let emotions play into this circumstance, because I'm not interested in just my perspective. The perspective that I'm given is not just for food for thought for you and for the audience. It's also so that you can give me feedback on how you perceive it. That's part of the purpose, part of my entire journey. So there are multiple purposes there, but the idea that I'm getting at here is we have to be careful what concepts we apply to a situation. I wouldn't use the concept of division at all because we know from psychological history evidence that if concepts influence our further perception and our further behavior, if I consider this a division that we're having right now, I am far more likely to then treat you with contempt. But I don't want that, and I know that that's a bad thing. Just as much as you could say that certain ideas are inherently harmful, I could probably argue using similar logic that other ideas that have been expressed in this episode to me might be inherently harmful, but I don't assume any kind of moral high ground for attacking you for them or for sort of confronting them with you. What I am assuming here is that we need to ask questions. And I'm not saying you're claiming moral high ground at all or that you have any of the wrong intentions, but more that we have to be careful what concepts we accept. They could very quickly escalate, and they do frequently.
Yes, I am aware of the impact that emotions can have on how we communicate. And obviously, yes, if you're acting from a purely emotive standpoint, yes, you're going to do something antithetical to progress. Absolutely. However, I do think emotions do serve a good purpose. Whether we have intelligent design or whether emotions evolve for a reason, our emotions, I guess you could say they demonstrate appropriate reactions to certain, like I said, like I mentioned earlier, if I killed your whole family, you better be sad, John. You should be. If you killed my wife, I would be very sad. It would be more than one bummy day for me. And that's good. It's good that I would react that way. But you can get angry and you can get upset. You can even get furious and do a confrontation, but still have the words coming out of your mouth and your posture generally be calm and your words be, critical but factually grounded. I might insert a few more insults than I normally want to, but I think for the most part, most people can have a discussion, just saying what needs to be said, not talking past one another, and still have the emotions be pretty influential to wanting to have the conversation in the first place. I think it's good. I always enjoy talking to people I disagree with. Most people I talk to, I disagree with.
I think this discussion that we've had, Jack, has actually raised more questions than it's answered, which is a good thing, I think. That's the entire point, to model to our audience that sometimes there are no simple answers and that we have to keep being willing to ask questions. So with that, I would like to thank you for your collaboration. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. For your listeners, I'm going to do a shameless plug here. I write on Substack and I have a podcast. And so if you want to reach me, my email is, I believe, accessible from my Substack. You should be able to email me. If you want to cuss at me, I think that's good. I don't think it's good, but it's okay if you want to criticize me. But yeah, I have a podcast called Veridical where I bring on people that are relevant in a particular field. I've been having a lot of political episodes, but lately I've been taking a turn down philosophy. So there's some exciting episodes on philosophy. All my guests are verified people, credible people in their field. I'm not bringing on randoms from the street, and I write on Substack.
And to our audience, thank you everybody for joining us. As stated before, if you have any concerns about yourself or someone else, never take what you find in the media or online as advice. Seek advice from a professional. And if you would like to contact either of us, our contact details will be in the description of this episode. If you have any feedback to give or would like to collaborate, please also feel free to make contact. And until next time, take care.
Hey, thanks a lot, John. This was good.